Hello and welcome to another edition of the Property Buyer and Sellers Podcast. This week I'm joined by the amazing Richard Worrell, who is part of the company Network Auctions, which, as many of you will know, is something that we're affiliated to and do a lot of business with. So we're going to talk auctions today. We're going to talk about potentially saving quite a lot of money as well. But the amazing thing about Richard is not only that, it's the marks that come with him. Amazing. He's the immediate past president of NAVA, that's the National Association of Valuers and Auctioneers. So we are in the presence of greatness, and also a current Property Mark board member. Richard, welcome, and tell us about your Property Mark appointment.
Hi, Ken. Lovely to see you. So, Property Mark is the overriding body for the National Association of Estate Agents, ALA, the Association of Residential Letting Agents, NAVA, National Association of Valuers and Auctioneers, has a commercial division, has an inventory division, and now we have a buying agents division as well. So back in the day, we all used to belong to our own associations, NAA, NAVA, ALA.
Yeah.
But Property Mark is the overriding umbrella for all of us. And so it is a membership organisation. There's over 18,000 members now across all the divisions, and it's a member-led organisation. So everybody who works for Property Mark, their role is to make everything better and more efficient for the members. And as such, the board consists of 6 elected directors from the ALA division and the NAA division. And as I started off nearly 40 years ago in this profession as an estate agent, I'm a fellow of the National Association of Estate Agents, and although I represent them, I'm also there to represent the NAVA members as well. So quite an honour. Lots of reading as a board member. Very different from my role as president of the National Association of Valuers and Auctioneers, which was lovely. Spent a year going round, seeing as many of my fellow valuers and auctioneers as I could, and attending upwards of a dozen conferences all over the UK and in Northern Ireland. And that was great, and that was lovely. That's the kind of thing that I really love doing.
Fantastic. I'm tired even thinking about it. Sounds amazing. And Johnny, so we're here today to talk. We're going to talk about auctions because Richard is an expert in the auction market, and we've got something that I think is really important to talk about. But just before we get onto that, Richard, perhaps you could tell us how you feel, what's sentiment like at the auctions at the moment? How are auctions doing right now in the UK?
Really interesting. I mean, all the numbers are up, in short, so I'll keep it brief. Properties being taken to auction are up year on year, and in the quarter year on year as well. Stock sold has increased year on year. Money's raised has increased year on year. So it's a pretty strong picture across both the commercial auction world and the residential property auction world. I've been doing what I do for a long time, as you know. It's August. August is normally a time when I play a little bit of catch up and try and get out and see a few people. I've not had a chance to do that. We're listing, just listing like I've never done in an August before. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that, and maybe we'll have a chat about that shortly.
Yeah. So, thanks. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this particular episode of the podcast with you was because I think, and by the way, I must preface this by saying this is not financial advice, but it is a gut feeling of mine. And if you look it up, you'll find that common sentiment tends to echo this. Rachel Reeves, the new Labour Chancellor, now has given away some money in various ways to various people, such as the NHS and everyone else. And so she needs to get money. And she's already said that the books don't balance when she's moved in to becoming Chancellor. And in some shape or form, that means taxes. She's already said that general taxes will not rise, but there hasn't been any mention that she will not increase capital gains tax. Now, capital gains tax won't be important to you if you're selling your principal home. It doesn't matter because your principal home is free of tax. So therefore, this is only relevant if you're selling a property currently, which is subject to capital gains tax, which means if you have a buy-to-let property, a second property which is not your principal home, you will be liable for this tax, which is already there. And the current rate of capital gains tax is 18% for a basic rate taxpayer and 24% if you're a higher rate taxpayer. Now, just I don't want to bore with the statistics, but you're a basic rate taxpayer if you earn below 50k. Between this and 125, your class is a higher rate taxpayer. So on that basis, the CGT allowance, that's the amount that you can gain before it applies, has been reduced consistently over the last few years. It was 12,300 in 22. It was then reduced to 6,000 in 23, 24, and it's now just £3,000. So you can see there's a direction of travel here, and that is downwards. We're all going to pay more tax whether we like it or not. That's regardless of the changes. But where this becomes really interesting, Richard, and what I wanted to talk to you about was that the rumours are that they're going to equalise capital gains tax with income tax. And this could have a significant effect. I'll give you some numbers that we've done around it, or I should say thanks to my wife for doing the numbers around this. She's more the accountancy brains of the family. Currently, if you had a profit after expenses of, let's say, £250,000, if you're a current basic rate taxpayer, on that £250,000 profit, you would pay £45,000 in CGT as a basic rate taxpayer, or 60,000 as a higher rate taxpayer. Now, what's interesting is if they do equalise it with income tax, then as a higher rate taxpayer, that £60,000 bill will go up to 100,000. Now, that's quite significant. And what's interesting is the larger the figures are, the larger the profit that you've made, the more likely it is that there's a significant loss that you could find yourself having to suffer if she does make this announcement. Now, there's no guarantee that she will. I have to stress that. But the gut feeling is, from everyone I'm speaking to, that CGT is going to be changed. And if she does that, then the really interesting thing about that is you've got an auction coming up, haven't you, Dickie? And it is, sorry, I call him Dickie. His name's Richard, but that's his nickname. And that is coming up on the 24th of October. The reason that's particularly interesting is because if you're in a residential sale right now, even if you found a buyer recently, with the average transaction time of between 20 weeks and 30 weeks, there's no likelihood that your sale will go through before any additional taxes are due. The beauty of the auction is that when the hammer goes down on the day of the auction, that's the tax point. And that will be on the 24th of October in this case, won't it, Dickie? So that means that you could potentially sell your property for less money through the auction, have a quicker, simpler deal, and end up with more net profit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everybody's individual circumstances is going to be slightly different, but yeah, I think you've summarised it really well there. There's a lot of conjecture, opinion about what is going to be announced in the budget at the end of October. The Labour Party made it very clear in their manifesto that they would not be raising income tax, VAT, etc. But they have to raise money from somewhere. Capital gains tax does seem to be one of the ones that they will target quite probably. And if they do, the rates, I'm having conversations with clients along exactly the lines that you just described there. And their view is, I'm going to be selling now, I want to sell now, and I want to sell at auction now because I want to get this property sold on the basis that I'm fairly confident that this is going to happen. Now, that's their view. I don't know any more than the next person exactly what Rachel Reeves is going to announce at the end of October, but I think there's a pretty strong chance that capital gains tax is going to be increased along the lines that you've described. So the figures that you were talking about there are quite substantial.
Yeah.
So instead of, and it's not just the figures, the other thing that you made a really good point about there is that if you're selling by private treaty, unless your sale is very well advanced at the moment, the chance of it actually exchanging contracts before the end of October is fairly slim. The average transaction time is, as you said, 18 to 20 weeks. Whereas with auction, for the auction on October the 24th, we begin marketing the properties around the middle of September. You get an exchange of contracts on 24th of October. That's the tax point. Job done. So that's the reason why I think a lot of people are considering that at the moment. And the reduction that you would have to potentially make to sell at auction will possibly not be as great as your potential increase in tax that you'd pay on the sale. And yeah, that's
I agree.
Quite a driver for a lot of people at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's a driver for me, as you know, because I've actually decided to put one of my properties in the auction that we were selling on the open market. And the reason I've done that is that I do believe that capital gains tax is likely to go up. There's also an element of this could be a really smooth sale, really easy, quick deal, because the great thing about the auctions is that there is no post-sale negotiation. On the day, the contracts are exchanged, and 28 days later, the money's in the bank. And the beauty of the exchange is that that is the tax point. That's the key thing here. So for me, I had a sale progressing. It had just started. It was at a substantially higher point than I expect to gain at auction. However, I think that when CGT changes, because I think it will, no guarantee, but I think it will substantially, the difference will be minimal, if any, between the two numbers. But the beauty for me is the simplicity of transaction, the almost guarantee of the transaction, and the fact that we know that it's likely that it'll be out of our lives well in time for any potential raise in capital gains tax. And so if you do have a second property and you are considering what we're talking about now, then do get in touch with me, ken@jamesalexander.com, and we can get you in the auction. We still have time. I know it might seem like we haven't, but we do have time, and we can talk around the numbers, what you might achieve, and we can be fairly accurate with that these days, can't we, Dickie, with the way that we work out our analysis?
Absolutely. And I think the thing with all clients who end up selling at auction is they want that security of sale. They want that certainty of sale, as you've just described. So yeah, at the close of the auction, as long as the reserve price or better has been met, the buyer exchanges contracts. That is a legal and binding agreement. And for most people who are transacting in property, certainty is something that they are desperately looking for, because the private treaty process is full of uncertainty. Yes, you're right. Plenty of time to list the property. We've actually got an auction on September the 19th as well. So if anybody is, very ready, then they can still enter into that as well. So they got, if for any reason it didn't sell at that auction, they could still go into the 24th of October. So potentially get 2 bites of the cherry. But we tend to get our pricing right in the first place. Our success rate for this year so far is 85% across all the auctions. So that's a pretty high percentage. That's where auctioneers want to be. You want to be 80% plus. So yeah, get the pricing right. There are buyers out there. There's very motivated buyers in the same way as there are very, very motivated sellers. So yeah, move forward, make that decision if you feel that's right for you. And yeah, we can certainly assist and make that happen.
And where this could work really well is it's a bit of a sweet spot timing wise, because my view is, as far as the market is here in London, our busy time now is September. And that September market starts about the second week in September and starts to tail off at the end of September or early October. And again, this just fits nicely into your October auction scenario, because if you do find that you haven't quite got there with a sale in September, as the market shuts down, the auction market's quite different, isn't it? And there will still be buyers out there for the October auction. And yes, there may be a price difference, but as we discussed, that price difference may not be that great when we take into account potentially what might happen with CGT.
Absolutely. And I think that, again, a lot of auction sellers anyway are not about getting the last pound note out of the deal. They want that certainty. They want that security. Far better to transact with somebody over a set time frame. You know exactly what's going to happen. You know what date you're going to exchange contracts. That's the date of the auction. It's about getting that deal done.
I agree. And the other thing that I love about auctions is, and sometimes, I mention this to clients, especially, I say, look, you don't know me. You've got a property that you want to sell in the auction. That's great. Or you want to sell on the private market. But here's the thing. Most estate agents, or a lot of estate agents, I'm sorry to say, do have their favorite builders, and they will sell your house to their favorite builder. And then there'll be money change hands that you don't see. It does happen, I'm afraid, even in today's market. And therefore, the beauty of the auction as well is the transparency of the platform. Anyone can bid. You can't sell it to your favorite builder if it's going to the room, because it's not up to them. It's up to whoever's actually bidding on the day. And I love that sense of we've got access to the whole of the country, in fact, the whole of the world via the auction platform, that can potentially bid on your home and make sure that you're not undersold. Because I think that's also a fear for people, even when selling a property where maybe they don't want to squeeze the last dollar, just having that peace of mind that everybody had a chance to bid, as opposed to a restricted favorite number of an estate agent's, clients that they always go to.
Absolutely. It's a clear and transparent process. There is absolutely no doubt that competitive bidding on a property will always lead to the best result for the seller. And you can't get that by making a call, even if it's to a person who has bought a number of properties through your agency before. If you agree a sale on private treaty, the seller is not in control of that process. It's only ever going to move as swiftly as the slowest person involved in that process. And if you put your eggs in that basket, and for whatever reason your purchaser goes away on holiday for a couple of weeks, or the purchaser's solicitor goes away on holiday for a couple of weeks, before you know it, you're way behind in the time frame of the transaction, and you're pushing things through. And that means that the buyer then is on the front foot. Whereas with auction, the seller is always in control. You know what your reserve is, and everybody who's involved in the potential purchasing of that property, so your prospective buyers, know that's how the property is being sold, know that that's the rules of the game, if you like, and they then participate in that. So when you attract enough people into the buying process, that's when you get multiple bids. That's when sort of auction fever, for want of a better word, takes over. And as the seller, you know that you've got the best possible price. It's not just one phone call to one person who says, I'd like to buy.
Absolutely. Now, can we just go over some numbers? Because something I know a lot of people get confused with is the difference between the reserve price and the guide price. Can you talk us through that and the theory behind it, Richard?
I can, yeah. So as auctioneers, we have really strict guidelines that we have to work to, as laid down by Advertising Standards Authority and the Trading Standards Department. So, and this is there to give all prospective purchasers for a property a very clear indication of where the auctioneer can sell at. Okay, we are not allowed to put silly low guide prices on property in order to attract lots of interest and have a reserve price that is not reflective of where we can sell at. Okay, so I'll give you a really simple example. So if you have a property if you see a property in an auction catalogue or advertised for sale by auction, and it has a band, so let's say the band is 250 to 260,000 pounds. That's the guide price. The reserve price cannot be higher than the highest figure quoted in that band. Okay, so that means that the reserve price cannot be higher than 260,000 pounds. So if you attend an auction in person, or you're seeing that auction run online, if you see that 260,000 pounds has been bid, the reserve can be anything below that, but whether it's an online auction or in the room, the auctioneer will always say, make no mistake, I've met the reserve, we're selling. But you know that if 260,000 pounds has been bid, that property should be being sold. Okay, is that clear?
Yeah, I think that's very clear. Thank you. And then people will ask, why? Why would you quote a lower figure?
Yeah, one more. So, or an auctioneer can have a single figure with a plus sign after it. So, same scenario, property is guided at £250,000 plus. Now, slightly different. We're allowed up to 10% discretion above the guide price. So you could have your reserve set up to anything up to £275,000. I personally like to use the full 10%. I might have a little bit of latitude, might have 250 plus as the guide, 255, 260 as a reserve, but we are allowed to have up to 275. So if you see a plus sign after it, add 10% on. And so you know if the property, if there's a bid on that property at 10% above that, that should be being sold. And I would urge anybody who attends an auction or sees one online where that doesn't happen to get in touch with us at NAVA, and we can report that to the relevant authorities, because we have to work on the basis that everybody who enters the auction process as a buyer, you're going to be doing your due diligence on the property. You're probably going to have to sort monies out, move it from one place to another. You're going to get a solicitor to look at a legal pack for you. All of that costs time, effort, and money. So it's not a process to engage prospective purchasers at a false level. That's not right. That's not what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. Yeah. And NAVA being the National Association of Valuers and Auctioneers, if you're Googling it, looking it up and needing to get in touch for reasons of difficulty with an auction. Now, from the buyer perspective, can you give us some advice on what a buyer would need to do in order to be prepared for auction in terms of how does it work? How do they get to bid on a property in this world of digital auctions now?
Okay, so a lot of auctions are run online. They're either run online only, so there's no auctioneer actually on view. It's an automated system, or you might be interested in a property that's a streamed auction, where they'll be taking bids online and on the phone and maybe from the room, but you'll see the auctioneer actually conducting the auction and announcing the bids as they happen. But either way, you're going to need to register with that auction house as a prospective purchaser. You should be asked to provide your identification, 2 forms of ID for anti-money laundering purposes. That's mandatory. And you should be asked to provide proof of your deposit funds for that purchase. And once all of that's done, then you will be registered to bid and allowed to partake in that auction. But you need to provide your ID. So my advice to everybody is don't leave it till the last minute. Anti-money laundering checks take time. You might not have the right documents to hand. Don't be thinking it's like buying a watch on eBay where you can just think, oh, I'll do that now, and I know the auction's closing in 20 minutes. No, you need to get your ducks in a row. And with regards to any advice for anybody who's looking to purchase at auction, do your due diligence. I say this time and time again. There should be a legal pack available with every property that goes to auction. Read it, understand it. If you don't understand it, get a legal representative to look at it on your behalf. If you are not comfortable, do not bid.
I couldn't agree more. We had Julie Conliffe on the show just last week, and we were talking about the same thing. And we created a new acronym, which is RTFL, read the flipping legals, because too many people don't, and then they're confused by the outcome. And so, yeah, absolutely, read the legal pack. And if you don't understand it, get independent advice on that. But I do think that by the same token, we've talked about, reasons of caution and everything else, but actually it also can be a good experience for buyers as well as sellers because of the speed, and you can actually make a transaction move relatively quickly. And I know lots of people think that all properties at auction have some sort of problem, don't they? And this is not the case, is it?
No, we sell more and more properties now for clients who are just in a far more regular situation. So to give you an example, sellers who have had multiple transactions fall through and they just want to get closure for a whole bunch of reasons. We deal with a lot of executors who are dealing with the disposal of property from estate. We're dealing with a huge amount of clients now who have family members in care homes or care facilities where they have to pay for the fees. And these are all people that are under a time constraint. They need to get that property sold within a reasonable time frame, and private treaty selling just hasn't or doesn't give them that certainty of sale. So it's not always properties that are problematic, i.e. structural issues or non-traditional construction or short leases, or generally properties that you can't get funding on. There's a lot of properties that go to auction now that we are selling to end users, i.e. people who are going to live in them. For those buyers like that certainty of purchase in exactly the same way as the sellers like certainty of sale. If you put an offer in on a property on private treaty, 2, 3, 4 weeks, however many weeks down the line, somebody else who saw it a little while ago can come back and make an offer. The agent has to tell the client by law that there's been another offer on the property, and you could lose out on that property. So there's no certainty of the buyer that you're going to get the property you want until the exchange contract.
That's a real consideration, isn't it? Somebody could effectively go out, spend money on a survey, perhaps, get a mortgage offer, get a solicitor's advice, and then lose out because someone overbids. But then the flip side of that is they could also get themselves a substantial bargain relative to the private market.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's fair to say that most properties that go to auction are guided and reserved at an attractive level because as auctioneers, we know we are selling to more commercially minded buyers, people who have the funds available to proceed or have access to short-term funding. So if you can put yourself in that position, yes, you may well get a nicely priced property compared to what you would have potentially paid on private treaty. But most importantly, you know you've got it. You've exchanged contracts. Nobody can take it away from you. It's a done deal.
Fantastic. Richard, thanks very much for coming on the show again. It's always great to have you on and your endless wisdom. Couple of things to say. Firstly, if you are considering selling at auction, then please do get in touch. ken@jamesalexander.com. We can talk you through the process and get you on board and potentially save you some money, subject to what happens at the budget. And we have 2 auctions coming up as well, don't we? We've got one on the 19th of September, and then the next one after that on the 24th of October. If you're a buyer or seller, then I'd advise you check those out.
Absolutely, that's it. 19th of September, 24th of October. Myself and my 2 able assistants behind me here, Ruby and Logan, will be able to talk you through the auction process. They've been very still during this chat, which I'm quite amazed about.
They'll pounce as soon as the phones start ringing, I'm sure.
They will.
Richard, thanks for coming on board. Speak soon.
Just before you go, Ben, I do like the, and I'm going to use that, read the flipping legals, RTFL.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, I'll remember that one. And yeah, Julie, she's a great solicitor. If you're a client who's looking to sell at auction, I would highly recommend Creative Legal.
She's fantastic. Yeah, and her story is an amazing one. You can hear that on one of the podcasts wherever you're listening. If you're looking on Facebook or other platforms, then please do look us up on your favorite podcast provider. Just search the Property Buyer and Sellers Podcast. As always, thanks for listening and have a fantastic week. We'll be back next week with another edition. Until then, ciao.
Bye-bye.